Welcome to Let's Clear the Air, a podcast sponsored by the Allergy, Asthma, and Sinus Center, dedicated to educating listeners about allergies, asthma, and immunology.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Clear the Air. This is your host, Marcella Feathers, and I'm here with Dr. Cline. Hello, Dr. Cline.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing well, and you?
I'm doing great.
Yay, okay. Well, today we are going to talk about something I have been seeing proliferate across the World Wide Web, and I am very curious about it, hence why I asked you to speak on it. Mail-in allergy testing, specifically the ones that require your saliva or your hair. And call me a skeptic, but I'm not so sure that those work. What's your take on some of those, Dr. Cline?
Yeah, so I think this is something that we will see more and more, and I always try to warn patients, like if it sounds gimmicky, it probably is gimmicky. And there's a lot of companies out there, I think, that are, for lack of a better term, just trying to make money, essentially. And so in our current practice parameters and guidelines that we try to follow pretty closely in the field of medicine, these tests are not necessarily recommended, and it's hard to know often what to do with the results. And so the difference would be, while it may be convenient to send in a saliva or a hair sample, when we talk about skin testing methods, or allergy testing methods rather, what we're trying to do is to detect sensitization. And by that we mean, has your body developed a specific IgE as an epsilon antibody or an allergy antibody to a specific tree or grass or food or whatever. And when it comes to these things, it's very hard to know, like, have those allergy antibodies made their way into a hair follicle or saliva. Those are not traditional places that we see allergy cells or mast cells. And so I think a lot of these are probably very unreliable, that you may get a lot of negative results. You may get a lot of positive results that it's hard to know how to interpret. And so I would always recommend exercising extreme caution. And if someone is curious, I've always welcomed them to come in and so we can discuss it further. But in the current guidelines, these are unfortunately not recommended. And so they have a lot of different expert panels. One is the NIAID expert panel, which recommends against using hair analysis for the routine evaluation of food allergy, and it cites a lack of evidence demonstrating any diagnostic value. So one of our practice parameters, which is what we call the Quad AI or the college, this is the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology and the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. In their food allergy practice parameters, they state that hair analysis, quote, should not be used for the evaluation of food allergy, with a strong recommendation against doing this. And some of the reasons why these tests fail is because, number one, they haven't been vetted over years and years and years. And so with the skin testing that we traditionally do when people make their first appointment here, it's been vetted. It's been done for years and years and years. So we know and trust the results. We know what trees, grasses, weeds, dust mites, we know what to test for. And with these tests, they haven't really been standardized. So when it comes to food allergies, for example, we're looking for specific proteins. Like for milk, it's the alpha and beta lactalbumin and casein and whey. And so with these food tests that they're doing through the hair and saliva, are they testing for the proteins, or are they just testing for something else? Has it been compared to a control? Like, have they compared it to see against a control to see what a negative means, what a positive means? And so it hasn't been vetted. And so really anyone can go out and make these tests, but have they been validated or vetted? And what I always hope is that patients try to seek counsel, especially when it comes to food allergies, because you can get inappropriately diagnosed in a hurry if you're not very careful. And so if that testing has not been compared to a control, for example, you may end up with a false positive, meaning a positive result to peanut, but you have been able to eat peanuts all along, or you don't have a true allergy to peanut. And so that's one that I would always recommend exercising extreme caution. And so,
I thought it was interesting because when I just went out to look at some of the tests that are available, they mentioned doing food intolerance and sensitivity and environmental, but they tested for like over 1,300 different items. And I'm like, okay, we don't even.
No.
and it did say that a lot of patients were overwhelmed by the results, or that they were confused by them. And one of the things even that the tests, some of them recommended was, oh, well, just stay away from these foods that we've recommended, which, it's just a lot of information that could be conflicting or confusing that's really not helpful. And then you've wasted, what, $50 to $120, $150?
Yes, I've seen as high as $400 to $600 spent on the food intolerance or sensitivity testing. And it goes, and taking a step back to talk about our earlier principles. So we have the mast cell or the allergy cell, which that guy is the one who's on alert looking for food allergies. And he's trying to recognize IgE as in epsilon allergy antibodies, which is the traditional allergy antibody. With the food sensitivity testing and just having seen these for years and years and years where patients come in with results, that testing is based on the IgG antibodies. So IgG is in gamma, which is very different than IgE is in epsilon. So the IgG antibody can just be created if your body has seen it. And so, for example, I had a patient who showed up positive to coffee on or caffeine on their IgG testing.
Oh, I
and
would
they
die.
said, yeah. And they said, how is this true? Am I allergic to coffee? Because I drank coffee, every day before I got this test back, and then it recommended I remove it. And my answer to that is, this is an IgG antibody, so it's not, we don't know for sure, but it could have been elevated just because you had consumed it consistently. And the same thing with all the other things on there. So I told them, I said, I'm happy to test for the IgE antibody to, coffee or caffeine, but the best test is that you consumed it with no issues. And so there's no better test than you being able to tolerate it. And so I think you just have to be very cautious and always try to counsel people that if they come in and we end up doing some testing and we're thinking food intolerance, always try to mention, be very leery about any food intolerance testing because it is not validated. We do not know what a positive result means or a negative result means. And sometimes you can be out of pocket $400 or $500 without any useful diagnostic information. And so I think the same thing goes for a lot of these kind of blood mail-in. It always goes back to, what are they checking? If they checked an IgE antibody, okay, was it specific for the proteins, or was it just checking something a molecule that we have never heard of? And so the allergy textbooks that we read when we go through training, it goes over in excruciating detail with cold words on a page, each of these proteins that you're looking for and what they do. And so if it's anything outside of that, because these proteins have been researched for years and years and years, so if they're just checking some new unnamed protein, even if they have an IgE antibody to that, then what does that mean? We don't really know for sure. So the mantra always goes back to, if you're not really sure, it's always best to come in, seek our counsel. If you're a provider, send in that referral if you're not sure. And so always try to tell my referring providers, or patients, if you're not sure, just come and talk with us about it, because it's better just to kind of talk about it and go through before you end up out $400 or $500 without any useful diagnostic information. And then I've had people avoiding, 20 to 30 foods, and they come in with the paperwork that has, several hundred foods on there, and they're like, what do I eat? And we just have to go down the line and say, okay, so it showed up to carrots. Have you eaten carrots? Have you tolerated them? Would you prefer the IgE testing to that? And so there can be a lot of moving parts in there, and it creates a lot of confusion. So I think it's just kind of a blanket statement of try to limit any non-validated, testing. And if you're concerned at all, just seek counsel.
Yeah, I think that's the best idea, because, you've even spoken to this. It's nice to have the expert as that counsel who's one-on-one with you and can talk about your history and talk about what you've may already have been avoiding or what your symptoms are, so that you don't have to avoid 50 or however many different foods or coffee, heaven forbid.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the threat level there? Like, do you need an EpiPen? Is there something real there? And so the answer is not just avoidance. They can't really say, okay, avoid it. But if you were to become cross-contaminated with it, for example, or, someone, snuck caffeine or coffee into something, like, do you have to carry an EpiPen? Yes or no? And so the avoidance is, even for traditional food allergies that we see people had a reaction, we don't just tell them to just avoid. We strongly recommend having an EpiPen or an auto-injector device in some form. They have the nasal spray, Neffy now, just some sort of epinephrine auto-injector device or auto-intranasal device to help pull you out of that allergic reaction. Because what are you going to do if you're on a cruise ship, if you're in if you're in Antarctica or you're overseas or something happens, you have to have something to get you through that reaction. So avoidance itself is not necessarily the answer.
Yeah. Well, when in doubt, come see an allergist.
Right, exactly.
And don't take a chance, and definitely do not avoid anything that you don't have to, as far as coffee.
Right.
Again, back to coffee or, some of those other things that we love. All right. And are there types of certifications that you would look for on, say, the blood test or something, or are they all pretty much kind of just...
Yeah, so I haven't really seen, it would have to be something that has been cleared through our academy, so the Quad AI or the College
probably
of
not
Allergy.
Anything that has been.
Yeah, there's not really much that's been cleared other than the traditional skin testing, which we've done for years and years and years. But if someone comes with a new company, it may gain a little bit more merit if they have the IgE as an epsilon antibody there, and it's going after the specific proteins. Let's say that someone, comes in with concern of milk allergy. Based on this outside testing, if it had an IgE allergy antibody and it showed up to casein or whey or alpha lactalbumin or beta lactalbumin, then that may carry more merit because those are the proteins we're looking for. So you just have to pan through it very quickly. But as soon as I see IgE or IgG rather, which is what I most commonly see on these, and I'm just saying, okay, we can probably ignore these results.
Yeah. Well, what is the difference? Because we send in blood tests for some food sensitivities or allergies. What's the difference between what our blood test is versus, I guess it is it the IgE?
It's just the specific IgEs dedicated towards specific proteins.
Okay.
And so back to our example of components. So like peanut, for example, we're checking like a peanut specific total IgE. And then some of us, including myself and the people who train me, will add on components very commonly. So each of those can have specific components within the peanut proteins that may mean different things. And so, but the major difference is we're just checking the IgE is in epsilon.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Cline.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions about food allergies, food sensitivities, or if you've done one of these at-home tests and are kind of confused, we would sure love to help you figure that out safely and correctly.
Yes.
All right. Thanks again. And that does it for this episode of Let's Clear the Air.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Let's Clear the Air. Please consider following this podcast, and remember, if you want helpful and accurate information about allergies and asthma, our allergy experts are here to clear the air.